World leaders gathered at the G20 summit in South Africa have issued a joint declaration addressing climate change and other global challenges, despite opposition from the United States, which is boycotting the meeting. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, the host of this year's summit, emphasised the significance of the first African G20 presidency. He also said there would not be a traditional handover to the US, which is due to take over as G20 president for 2026. That's after Washington announced it would only send an embassy official to Johannesburg. South African Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola explained that the handover ceremony at the summit required officials at the appropriate level.
So the handover must happen at the head of state level, or at least a minister who is properly designated by the President of the United States of America. So now that they have assigned a charge, we have said DIRCO has equivalent officials of the charge. Hence, we welcome that they will now receive, we will do the handover. We will do it at DIRCO offices anytime from Monday.
And let's bring you up to date now on the latest from Johannesburg. We can go over to our correspondent, Dianne Hawker. South Africa says no traditional handover ceremony of the G20 presidency to the US after Trump skipped the summit. How unusual is this?
Well, I would say, Ben, it's quite unusual. We've heard the word unprecedented mentioned by analysts as well as representatives from the South African government many times. And that's simply because even though G20 representatives have disagreed on issues in the past, that disagreement hasn't previously gone to a level of boycott. For example, yesterday we heard from Argentina speaking in the plenary session about some of the issues within the declaration, saying that they were unhappy with some of the wording relating to the ongoing conflict in Gaza. However, that didn't lead to a boycott from them, but just voicing their concerns. And that's the way that things have been done usually. So with the US boycotting, it is quite an unusual situation, and it will be an unusual handover, as we heard from Minister Ronald Lamola, not a president-to-president handover, but simply diplomats meeting at the foreign ministry offices in Pretoria, handing over to the next G20 president, which is the United States.
And tell us, Dianne, about the significance of this first G20 in Africa with permanent representation in the G20 through the African Union for the continent.
Yes, I would say for the South African government, the African Union, and many of the presidencies from or representatives from the Global South, this has been a significant milestone to achieve. This is the last presidency of the first round of the G20, so we've now had 20 G20s, and South Africa is wrapping it up. They'll also be presenting a kind of report looking at the work that the G20 has done over the last 20 years. But I think the other significant thing is that the presidency really tried to focus on issues affecting African states, issues like the just energy transition, inequality, debt, and climate issues affecting the developing world. And I would say that South Africa is happy that it was able to get those issues on the agenda, but also get some kind of concession about it or agreement about what should be done about this in the declaration which was issued yesterday.
Can you give us more detail? What sort of way forward can African countries expect when it comes to tackling debt and slow growth?
Yes, absolutely. So the declaration was quite a lengthy one, a 30-page declaration, which touched on a lot of issues. There was an acknowledgement that there is a need for a global intervention into the issue of debt and to find ways to reduce the risk to developing countries. Of course, the details of that are yet to be worked out over time, but I think many of these things do start with an acknowledgement of the problem and then moving forward to potential solutions. We also saw a special report commissioned by South Africa, which was given to world leaders here, that closely examined some of the reasons behind the high debt, and another report looking at some of the reasons behind high levels of inequality. And the South African presidency has suggested the creation of a high-level panel that will continue to study inequality globally, and also to provide input to leaders on how they can tackle it, similarly to what's been happening with relation to climate change issues.
Which is another big one for Africa. DW correspondent Dianne Hawker in Johannesburg, thanks for your reporting.